You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Dead up perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 7th part of What If Deku Meets Bofuri. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Kuji 17 on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. UA Sports Festival. Race track. The first ones to break through the ice trap of Todoroki was led by Maple, who used her fire breath to thin out the ice by melting it, along with Pony, who used her horns to break the ice. Just like with the quirk evaluations, these girls were enjoying themselves, but this time racing at around half of maximum speed since they really needed to save their stamina this time. This did not stop the girls from being more than fast enough to get a sizable lead of 10 car lengths between them and the next pair. Behind them was Himiko Toga, who was running on all fours in her rightfully dubbed cat mode, that was possible now thanks to One for All empowering her. As if acting like multiple extra brains, the mental strain on her when using this technique that had previously caused her to go into an almost feral cat state after a few minutes at best was almost gone. Almost being the keyword, as if she used it long enough it would cause her to mentally become a cat again, something Bubble Girl took too much pleasure in when using her quirk to play with her in that state. Beside her trying to pass her and catch up to the leads was One's very own Beast Boy Jirota Shishida going all out to keep up with her. Though if his growling/barking and her hissing/meowing was any indication, his quirk animalistic features were definitely some kind of dog, despite some people in his previous school mistaking him for an orangutan quirk. It was also resulting in present Mike watching this literal cat and dog fight, currently dying of laughter as he was beginning to lose the ability to breath from laughing so strong. Fortunately for Aizawa, his friend, intense laughter caused their less than 100% healed injuries to flare up, causing them pain for the trouble they were causing his ears. Further behind the two of them by about 6 car lengths was Tsuyu Azui, hopping at top speeds going over the literal potholes the front four were making as they ran on all fours. Beside her on the left was Mizo Shoji, who broke out of the ice with ease where she had instantly avoided it earlier. Slamming his fists into the ground, he would then swing himself forward, then when he landed he would bring his arms back, bending his knees at the same time swngng his legs back. Then as he went forward he would swing his arms and legs forward, slamming his arms down in the process. Doing this over and over again, he was using his massive arm strength to propel him forward in great strides in an endless cycle of continued motion. Though he was faster than most, his bulky body still made him slower than most others, so he adopted a similar technique to how monkeys and gorillas swing from trees. This allowed him to keep up with the front, as before UA would never go this far, knowing people would ridicule him even more for being a mutant. But seeing Maple, Himiko, and other students do so without a second thought, he decided to stop holding himself back, now doing whatever it took to win, within some reason still. Then finally on Tsuyu Azui right side was Tokoyami, deciding to use the sports uniform shirt as a makeshift cloak to allow Dark Shadow to float above the ground, essentially flying. UA Sports Festival. Arena Center Field. After taking a few minutes to recover from his pain that came from aggravating his injuries like an idiot, present Mike went back to his mic. Alright folks, this clash of speed amongst the animal kingdom is really kicking OFF now. At the front with a significant lead is the big lizard and the horse, with potentially the cat or dog catching up to them. Will the two furry and one of them being more desirable petting than the other participant, believe me I speak from experience, catch up to the lead racers? Present Mike said, remembering when he tried to pat the 1B student head a while back to almost get backhanded by the normally gentle scholar. Though he did not love cats nearly as much as Aizawa, even he had to admit that petting Himiko in cat mode was the most relaxing therapy he has ever had. Until Mirko and Midnight kicked him off of the staff room couch to take their turn petting their daughter. "Hey Mike, I would not count out the remaining 3. Aizawa said as he squinted at the students bringing up the rear, unable to see completely clearly due the dust Shoji was kicking up. I know. Bringing up the rear is the octopus, frog, and the birds of darkness. Though the little froggy lady is a little slow, she should start to pick up speed once she warms up from the sudden chill everyone got earlier." Present Mike said, pointing out how Tsuyu was starting to recover her strength with her body temperature. If her current pace or recovery kept up, the two teachers would have no doubts that she would catch up with Himiko Toga and Jirota Shishida soon enough. This was when Present Mike also noticed what his friend was noticing, as a certain individual came into view in a rather new form, as well as wincing a moment later. "Is that izukumidoriya flying up to the front of this mixed pack of animals? Ow, that had to hurt. Looks like the age-old question has finally been answered, people. Ice chicken beats shadow chicken any time." But not just him, even the other two were taken down a notch by his AH. He asked in surprise, as all he knew was that the kid gained an ice quirk from eating the bird. Then freaked out when Mirko kicked a fire extinguisher through the announcer booth window. "Call my son a chicken again, and the next time I kick a security robot through that window, jackass." Mirko shouted at him while flipping the bird at him for even possibly implying her son was a coward. Fortunately for him, Vlad King had managed to pull her back into the hallways where she could not throw stuff at him. Aizawa also made sure to smack the voice hero across the back of his head as well for calling a hero student a chicken, even if it was just a worse than usual joke. And if there was one thing Aizawa knew, it was how bad his friend humor normally was, and today there was definitely something off about them and the jokes they were making. UA Sports Festival. Race track. Tsuyu Azui was originally in trouble with her limbs previously stiffened due to Todoroki earlier ice attack on everyone earlier in the race. Due to the shaking from Shoji choice of movement, Tsuyu was barely able to keep up with the two boys beside her without tripping. But now that she felt she had enough strength back into her limbs, she was getting prepared to time her leap to start getting a lead on to catch up to those in front. However, as she was about to do so, an icicle shot past her head, landing a good distance in front of the three. The light flashing off of it blinded her temporarily, so all she could tell was that Tokoyami, or rather his quirk, made some sort of screeching noise before falling and rolling behind her. Shoji was blind for only less than a second as he grew another eye to see the strong fall as Tokoyami quirk was sent retreating back into him, causing the bird-headed classmate to fall. Izuku, when Todoroki initially froze the ground, had to make icicles harder than the ice Todoroki had frozen the ground over with. Fortunately for him, once he was chipped to freedom, he just had to transform to his smaller bird form to catch up to the others. Unlike Maple, who had only two options of go full size for 5 minutes before losing control, or going half transformation, he had a third option. It was like his larger full bird form, but it was like the size of her half transformation, making him an 8-foot tall from beak to talon bird. But unlike Silverwing, where it was white, he was a bright green, while the green parts were now white on him, basically making it an inverted color to the original. This third form that was between the half transformation and full transformation was a best of both worlds scenario, so to speak. As it gave him a compact size similar to that of a half transformation, but allowed him to do the large-scale attacks similar to his full-sized form, unlike his sister who had to choose between the two. Though this did come with a longer time limit than the full form he would eventually snap, and the destructive instincts of his animal form would kick in. Though H did not know why, he was able to unlock this third form due to being native to this world and not the world Maple had come from. Due to his incredibly high INT stat, he was able to use it for a longer PRD than he normally would be able to as well. Catching up to 3 students as he flew past the other students who had already freed themselves before him, but after them, he made his move. Launching an icicle ahead of the 3, it blinded the girl with the frog quirk from 1B, along with his sister classmate Shoji, but for not as long. Then his real target was Tokoyami, who was the only one who could attack him as he passed by without losing speed. His plan worked as the light forced Dark Shadow to retreat into his partner body, causing them to fall rolling back behind him. Once he caught up to the other two almost immediately, he unleashed a small blizzard spell using a small portion of his MP pool, instantly slamming Tsuyu with her cold weakness. This caused her muscles to stiffen on her, resulting in a fall forward, but fortunately for her no rolling, unlike Shoji, who instantly slipped on the just as instantly frozen ground. A surprise meeting with Izuku confused the two students tied for second currently as he once again unleashed that same blizzard spell, rocketing forward ahead of them. Once again, the instantly frozen ground making the two almost lose their foot instantly. Suddenly he had found himself with not one but three new skills, along with the one he got during training, so he looked as he flew by using his beak to tap the screen, and these really could not have come at a better time. The previous skills he obtained during his training were Water Magic V as well as Water Manipulation, which the first required him to gain the first 4 levels of Water Magic obviously. To get the first level he had to use 50 water spells in order to get it according to the unlock condition. As for Water Manipulation, it was a simple skill that he needed to gather the moisture in the air to make regular ice. To say these were ridiculously overpowered considering his build was high INT, that as far as he could tell after talking about it with Maple concluded that it boosted magic attacks. He also had suspected that Sally had these same if not better, after reading their affects and how he got them. But right now, he had to focus on the sports festival. Letting them know about his suspicions of Sally abilities could wait till after this sports festival was done. Principal Niza no doubt would see this kind of revelation coming after finding out about his water magic skill he unlocked during training. Using his blizzard spell again once he was above Maple and Pony, he sent them both sliding back on the bellies/faces. It seemed Pony hooves were no better for running on ice than a pair of human feet. As a result she joined his cold-blooded sister behind him. Each use of the small blizzard spell he was using to boost his speed suddenly cost a negligible amount of MP thanks to these new skills, so now he could be much less conservative than he originally thought he would need to be. Reaching a chasm filled with pillars connected by wires, he made sure to aim a few low-costing icicle spells at the ropes. Since they were stronger than his water manipulation skill, he used to make icicles normally, he figured they would cut through the ropes, which a few did. But quite a few also missed, as well as he was not used to aiming in his bird form yet. Luckily, he managed to damage a few more by using his talons as he descended then rose without compromising his speed. UA Sports Festival. Arena Center Field. And claiming third place so far in this event, Midoriya has reached the chasm. Present Mike said just before Izuku unleashed his plan. So, when Izuku did unleash it, well, out of the two announcers one was grinning his signature creepy smile while the other was slack-jawed in shock. "What is he doing?" he exclaimed as he saw the kid just limit the amount of people who could get across at one time even more. Turning to his friend, he saw them grinning for once, now understanding how they felt whenever they did something to get slapped upside the head. Maybe he should hold back a little bit more often from now on. "Why do you look like you are about to start laughing?" The kid had just cut down the action with those ropes. Present Mike scolded his friend in a very unusual turn of events, surprising not just the audience who knew of their yearly banter at this event but their colleagues as well. "Because Mike, that kid is being logical and twisting the rules to his advantage. Too many focus on their quirks and looking heroic like how the public wants them to, like the idiots they are," Aizawa said, causing the audience to boo at him, that is until he switched on the recording of Present Mike from a hot pepper eating challenge. "If you want to boo me for speaking the truth so badly, then imagine a hero failing to save your loved ones because they did not do everything they could to save your loved ones, but decided to put on a show for the crowd of civilians instead by trying to look cool like you all want to see," he said, practically dumping a bucket of cold water on the stadium audience. Both civilians and heroes alike were silent. Many heroes had remembered how they failed to save someone because they felt they needed to do it in a way that looks heroic. For the civilians, they could not help but imagine their loved ones dying cause their favorite hero refused to do something that wasn't considered heroic by everyone else around them. Present Mike himself even started to feel depressed at the thoughts his colleague had put into everyone's heads at his rather vitriol words. Turning to his friend and putting a hand on their shoulder, they pleaded with their eyes to convince the man to say something to fix it. With a sigh, Aizawa turned his mic back on, getting the crowd's attention. That being said, it is a hero job to save people's lives above all else, and that means doing whatever it takes to save them, underhanded or not. Besides, for anyone who truly wants to be a hero and put their lives on the lines for others, a torn rope will not be enough to stop them here. He said, indicating to present Mike to get back to it as the competitors were beginning to approach the chasm. All right folks, you heard the hobo cosplayer. It will take more than a little ice to stop them, just look at the screens and you will see. Present Mike said, getting a glare from his friend when they called them a hobo cosplayer, but in his opinion the man deserved it for ruining the mood. If it was not for his lack of ability to explain complex tactics and the more technical aspects of people's quirk, then he would not need a person who hates the sports festival with every fiber of their being beside him in the announcer booth. Maple, why did you have to outdo your brother in making it more difficult for other people? Are you trying to kill your other competitors? He shouted, almost wanting to pull his hair out, as now it was near impossible to even approach it, let alone go through it. Though he obviously knew the question to his answer, it did not stop him from getting worried about the students. Unfortunately for them, Nizu told them to back off from fixing the flames and gas leak issue, as he wanted to see how the students overcame such an obstacle. UA Sports Festival. Race track. Reaching the chasm, Maple and Pony tackled it in rather unique applications of their quirks. Pony, controlling 4 horns, had planted her hand and feet on one each as she flew over the chasm. Maple attempted to use a concentrate form of her fire breath as a sort of pogo stick to launch herself to the first platform. However, she neglected to think of how well the ground would resist her concentrated fire. Needless to say, her plan failed, and she fell down as her flames continued to burrow ever more downwards, into a gas line. The explosion from it sent her flying over the chasm, completely catching up to Pony instantly. While this was going on, the chasm began filling with gas and blue flames, making it strong to breath between the intense heat, smoke, and smell of gas in the air around the pillars. The only upside was that this defrosted the ropes. However, those ropes were also metallic, so that meant they also conducted heat while becoming too hot to hold to climb across for most. When the others made it there, however, they could not wait, or second guess, as other people were catching up to them. Thanks to, you guessed it, Maple destroying a good chunk of the robot army when she went through there. Himiko, who had a good sense of balance, took a deep breath and ran across the thin metal ropes almost like a ninja. Shishida, thankful he was still covered in frost, as unlike Himiko, who jumped back in time earlier, he was directly hit by the blizzard. Grabbing a rope with tears in it and several others torn, he did a quick calculation before deciding his plan to move. Taking a deep breath, he jumped, grabbing the partially damaged rope, using his claws to cut it. Using his superior strength, he swung from pillar to get to the other side, narrowly avoiding getting caught on fire a few times. I knew UA said they would be tougher on us from this point forward, but this is ridiculous. The young man thought, not realizing this was all Maple doing, instead blaming it on the teachers, or more specifically Principal Nizu. Tsuyu, after a minute by the chasm, was warmed up, and simply jumped from pillar to pillar with one large leap each. Tokoyami, due to the smoke blocking out the sun and the flames below him, their light not reaching him effectively thanks to the smoke, was able to boost Dark Shadow strength to almost maximum power. This caused him to instantly smash apart the entrance to the fake trees with Dark Shadow when they landed on the other side before they returned to normal. Shoji, due to his naturally high healing factor, simply endured the pain and climbed from usable rope to usable rope, jumping from pillar to pillar upon occasion. When the other students got there, well, other than the support course students with their gear, most could not get through quickly, if at all. Naturally, those who could fly or withstand heat got through rather quickly, while the others had to make temporary alliances to get through it in one piece. A certain pink-haired student from the support course in particular, was prepared for this thanks to Izuku warnings, as she unleashed her mini-robot army to form a bridge. Alright Elizabeth 1.5's do your thing for mommy. Protocol bridge. May shouted as she took out of her backpack 15 spheres the size of softball. Much less complicated than her actual original body, they could handle simple orders, and protocol bridge was one of them. Unfolding from ball form to robot lizard form like some sort of armadillo, they formed a bridge by connecting to one another, for which she walked on them quickly. Then going from the very back onward, they would climb over one another to her from the side of the pillar, had repeated this process. May also made sure to put on her air filtering / cooling mask Izuku helped her make before she climbed into the fiery smoky hell that she suspected his sister had made. Elizabeth from the stands was getting excited to see that she could still help her mother from afar through her original design. Mirko and Midnight, however, were barely holding back cringed smiles at the completely opposite hells their son and daughter had unleashed on the students for the second and third obstacles. Which, because of them being on two completely different ends of the temperature spectrum, made the transition even more rough. Well, for those who do not have body heat preserving armor like Maple, who was wearing it today. UA Sports Festival. Race track. Izuku, after making it over the fake trees, had come face to face with a rather impossible obstacle for him. Maybe I should have flown over the wall at the start where the robots were. He asked himself out loud as he took in the sights before him. This place, unfortunately for him, was essentially a no-fly zone, as it was a chasm like the other previous one. Except it had multiple walking paths made of cement, one zigzag, another wavy like snake, and 3 that were straight. But something told him all 3 kinds had traps on them, and between was literal tornadoes, some blowing upwards while some sucked you down. It seemed they were connected, as he shot a few icicles into the ones sucking in air to see them get launched by the ones blowing upward. Though he could simply walk across one of the paths, he decided it was too risky to leave himself up to the mercy of whoever designed what traps these were definitely littered with. Here comes the big one then, he said to himself as he unleashed the strongest ice attack he had, freezing everything below the paths. Draining half of his current MP to do so, nothing short of maple fire could melt it before the first event was over. With the raging winds momentarily stopped, he began flying over one of the straight paths in case the wind went back on before he finished crossing. Using a boost with his blizzard spell, he just cleared it in time to see the tornadoes becoming connecting blizzards. The ground itself begins to collect frost after not even a minute had passed. Deciding he did not want to deal with the angry mob of students for how he froze both obstacles, he hurried along to the final obstacle. Noticing a rack of keys with instructions to take one, he grabbed a key before moving on to the final obstacle. UA Sports Festival. Arena Center Field. Oh folks, look like our little ice falcon won't be able to fly his way through this one. And it looks like he understands this too based off his test with the icicles he fired into those whirling winds. Present Mike said happily that for once someone from that family will not be able to go overboard for once. Seriously, what was the kid going to do, freeze the wind itself into stopping? He was about to laugh at the absurdity of his own inner joke when, as if reading his mind, his friend spoke up. How many times do I have to tell you not to test fate by saying and thinking stuff like that? Aizawa told him as he could roughly guess his noisy friend's inner thoughts. They probably thought that Midoriya, who was used to flying as his main mode of moving so far, would be slowed down by this. But if there was one thing he learned over the years, especially since meeting Maple that day, it was to never underestimate what someone could do, and like he thought, Midoriya had proven them wrong by every possible measure. He actually froze the wind so strong that it stopped. Present Mike shouted as he practically pressed his face against the glass of the announcer booth. Mirko and Midnight meanwhile were laughing in joy at seeing how strong Izuku has become with his powers in such a short time after getting them. To be more specific, he froze the machines in the bottom of the pit that generated the powerful winds, you idiot. And judging by the looks of it, just upgraded this obstacle for the other contestants while he was at it. Aizawa said in a deadpan tone like usual for the first half of what he said. His voice picked up a little in excitement when he noticed what Midoriya had accidentally done. If the student confused face was anything to go by, at least he thought it was a confused face. It is harder to read a bird's face than he thought it was. Maybe he should get classes from an animal expert while the students are out on their internships. Mirko. Midnight. For the other students' safety, teach your children some self-control. Present Mike exclaimed as this was the second time Izuku had made things harder for the other students. You really expect them to teach anyone self-control, let alone their own children? Aizawa said to his friend, raising an eyebrow at them. Yeah, I know, I realized what I said after a second of thinking on it. Present Mike admitted that what he just asked of the two women was unreasonable for them to pull off. Fortunately, the two women were restrained in advance this time before they could attack the two of them in the announcer booth. Well, at least Himiko cannot do anything too crazy, he said, making his friends slap themselves in the face, letting out groan. Oh, how can what I say turn out badly? It is not like she can control another element to transform it into something worse, right? Present Mike said, raising a fair point, that is in the case of anyone not connected to Maple in any direct way. Well, that aside, it looks like Maple is having a strong time with those traps, just like the other competitors will be soon enough, he said as Maple triggered a few, one of them causing him to wince as he wanted to hold his own foot. UA Sports Festival. Race track. Maple and Pony getting their spilt off as Pony ran down one of the straight paths while Maple was forced to stay behind as she figured out a plan. Decided she needed to simply do this the slow and steady way, she transformed back to normal and began walking across the same straight path as Pony. Unfortunately, this meant that all the traps she either missed completely or pushed to trigger by the slightest of touches were triggered by Maple after resetting themselves. Maple had gotten her leg pulled out from under her, tripped on a raised rock, and almost slipped off the side when one of her feet got slathered with slime. If the traps were not bad enough, thanks to the cold winds, even those who were not cold-blooded suffered when traveling slowly through here. However, seeing how strong of a time she had balancing in these intense winds, she had no choice but to go into her half-transformation. A big mistake, as even though it helped to fix her natural clumsiness, it also made her susceptible to the cold, so her plan did not last long. Fortunately for her, help had arrived in the form of Himiko, who went back to normal to prevent herself from going cat mode, as she did not need the extra strength and reflexes to do this. Maple. Are you okay? Himiko shouted in worry as she saw Maple curled up after just transforming back to normal in front of her on this path she chose. The dog boy of Class 1B, as she was going to call him from now on, who she was going up against before, chose a different path. I can't go fast enough to get through here in my N-normal form to avoid the traps. But my T-transformed form would leave me too weak to the cold wind. Maple responded as clearly as she could while shivering. Indeed, Izuku had turned this into a frozen hell even without the traps already put there in advance. Normally her high body temperature in normal form would be enough to resist this level of cold along with Himiko easily. But as she said, with the traps and her physical abilities significantly reduced, not even she could do this in her normal form. It did not help that the armor was absorbing her excess body heat that normally she would not need, but in this situation would be quite helpful for her in getting through this. I have a plan, I just need you to be ready to transform, grab me, and jump with everything you have when I signal you to do so, Himiko said, giving Maple hope of passing through here and further into the competition. Gathering her strength since they were already at the halfway point, she got ready to aim her strongest punch where they were standing. Now, she told Maple, who transformed, grabbed her, and jumped all in the span of a second, allowing Himiko to unleash her punch. This destroyed half of not just the path they were on but the other two straight paths beside them, launching the two upward with Maple leaping over to the other side cleanly. Despite the few minutes Maple needed to recover from the cold, luckily for Shishida he had already finished crossing when Himiko unleashed her attack. Due to a combination of her physical training as well as her quirk making her body more naturally adaptable to other quirks, she could use up to 30% with no issue. Granted, it was her limit, so thanks to her pushing it earlier at 20% constantly, she now could not use her quirk again for a bit unless she wanted to break her arm. this meant continuing on the old-fashioned way. Behind them the rubble had broken apart and mixed with the blizzard, getting covered in a thin layer of white on the already white surface of them. So now the paths were not only reduced from 5 to 2, but there was also rubble being tossed around that others had to dodge while moving forward. Needless to say, when the other student would find out after the sports festival was over what these 3 siblings did to them all. Well, it would have been an absolute riot if these siblings did not end up scaring them all with the difference in their power later on in the competition. UA Sports Festival. Arena Center Field. Present Mike was left speechless as the third sibling did end up adding to the elemental chaos by piggybacking off what Izuku did earlier. I told you not to jinx it with those siblings involved in this year's chaos. Aizawa said, snapping his fingers in front of present Mike's face to get his attention. Getting his focus back, the voice hero put himself back together before speaking up again. Next time it looks like I am about to jinx it, do me a favor and punch me Shota. Present Mike asked his friend. As it turns out, all 3 of those siblings are their own special brand monsters when it came to competing against them. Gladly, and I will hold you to that. Aizawa said, happy his friend would finally learn to stop testing fate. Moving on from the fiery hell and freezing hell, he turned his attention to the last obstacle that had stumped Todoroki and Mina so far. Though he doubted Midoriya would be troubled by it too much once he got a good look at it. Indeed, it looks like no matter the level of physical strength that got many this far, it is all meaningless if they do not have the brain power to figure this out. Present Mike said, pointing out how the muscle heads of the tournament were going to have it rough at the end. UA Sports Festival. Race Track. Todoroki and Mina, who made it over to the last obstacle, were needless to say annoyed by it, as both preferred to push through obstacles using mainly their quirks. There is nothing active on the other side moving, but from what I can tell based off of how the sound echoed when I punched it, there are multiple paths on each side. Mina said, removing her ear from the front of the door as she figured her ears could not pick up anything more of note. It was a useful skill she picked up due to her love of dancing and music, one that even she may not fully comprehend. It looks like to me, we have to answer puzzles to get further into this maze of doors. Todoroki told Mina, as he knew that mental challenges like this were sadly not his partner's strong suit. Working on the first puzzle, he had quickly figured it out, so they went through the now open door, seeing 3 possible new doors with a different puzzle each like the first 3 doors. You take one door and I take another door. Todoroki said as she nodded to him, going left while he went right. Due to them dividing tasks like this, they made it to the last set of doors just as Izuku had gotten to the third obstacle. However, there was an issue facing them now. They needed a key to open the last door. Scrambling to look everywhere for it, the two had come to a shocking realization. In their efforts to get ahead of everyone else, they had skipped an important part of this obstacle race that has now stopped them from getting through to the finish line. It was painfully ironic for them that their lead has now turned into the worst possible disadvantage they could get. Sadly, neither his ice nor her acid could break down the door. Defeated, they sat down backs against each other in exasperation. Too bad we can't just make a key. Wait, we can. Mina was complaining quietly one moment, then shouting the next, startling Todoroki. What do you mean we can make a key? He asked her, confused as to what she was talking about. All you need to do is fill it with ice, then use your fire to melt it a little. After that we can get a rough idea as to the shape of the key needed to open. We can make as many copies as we need till we find one the right size that will fit, she exclaimed, making Todoroki hesitant suddenly. This confused her greatly. What's the matter to do? Mina asked him, concerned about his sudden change in attitude. I can't use it, it's his fire. He said, thinking back to how the fire from his father was a curse, unlike his mother's blessing. Mina did not understand his explanation. He doesn't copy other people's quirks like Monoma, so what was he talking about? I don't quite know what you are talking about when you say, his fire, but I don't think you should be holding back. I mean, you are the one creating the fire, not someone else, so doesn't that make it your fire? She said, holding his hands that were shaking when he started taking about his fire half of his quirk. but had now seemed to calm down once she was done talking. I trust you, so please, even if it is only a little flame, we need you to do it. Mina told him as she took a breath with him to get him to focus. With a nod to her they got to work, and none too late as they heard what sounded like a large bird landing in front of the first doors, likely another competitor. After several minutes of making keys, Izukumidoriya entered the space with them. After he put the key in the hole, he went through closing the now open door before him. When it closed it broke the key in half. They heard the sounds of shifting metal as the other half was sucked into the other side, sounding like it got spit out. Then the lock made the same noises of shifting metal before it shifted again. This gave Mina and Todoroki the same idea after seeing it work normally. Fortunately for them, Mina could use her exceptional hearing to get the timing right after a few tries with icicles being used in the locks. Using the metal half of the key Izuku used that remained along with his own memory, Todoroki used his fire and ice to make as close to a replica as he could. Inserting it, he heard the lock twist open but waited for Mina's signal when it did fully open. Now! She shouted to him, letting him know it was time to do it. Making a larger icicle, he jammed it open a small crack just a half second after the lock began to reject the fragile ice key, so the lock was not fully in place yet. Mina used her acid on the partially opened door, as Todoroki covered them both in ice on one side of their bodies. Slamming into the door together, they managed to force it open, falling through, just as they heard another door open behind them. Gathering themselves together, they made it across the finish line together, expecting to hear second place. Shoto Todoroki and Mina Ashido have claimed third place together in a tie, folks. Present Mike announced, confusing them as to who beat Izuku and them to the finish line when they noticed, a grinning and clearly not exhausted Reina chilling out by herself, causing them to almost fall again out of shock. Soon more people trickled in, with only a few other pairs making it through together in ties. These people being Himiko and Maple claiming 7th place, 2 pairs of support course students for a total of 4 people, 2 claiming 21st place and the other claiming 26th place. Then came a 4-way tie for 15th place consisting of Tetsu, Achiko Uraraka, Kyoka Jiro, and lastly Nido Monoma. Looks like we had quite a few teams even before the second round had begun. That is quite impressive, people. Present Mike said as they had now reached the halfway point of entries into the next round. There were even some who, despite getting an early lead, began to fall behind due to the freezing/bludgeoning hell that Izuku and Himiko had accidentally created together. For one of the top examples was Tsuyu Azui, who was in position to potentially claim a top 10 spot at the start, had barely claimed 20th place. Setsuna Tokage, who caught up to the 15th spot at first, ended up falling to a 23rd place finish. Though she was not cold-blooded like Tsuyu Azui or Maple in her transformed form, she was still essentially mammal/reptile hybrid. Meaning she was still affected by cold significantly more than the average person, even though they leaned to the mammal side ever so slightly more than the previous 2 mentioned. It did not help that the winds also made it a no-fly zone, which also contributed to slowing her down, as well as flying around in separated body parts was her fastest way of travel. Looks like quite a few of the support students, despite only having a month to do so, have made some impressive gear, allowing them to keep up with the hero course students. Present Mike exclaimed as he spoke a genuine fact. Though most could not keep up with the hero course students who have been getting physically conditioned for things like this, there were a good few who managed to create support gear that in combination with their quirks got them some solid placements among the list of competitors. And the general education department managed to get some in there as well. Now that is what I am talking about, folks. He added with glee as they managed to do quite well for themselves, even if most had doubts about trying to get into the hero course right now. UA Sports Festival. Arena Center Field. A few minutes after the last qualifying persons had gotten in, Midnight had gathered them all together while she sent the other students off. Taking over for Mike, as Aizawa had pulled their friend aside to talk to them in private, since she could handle this next part herself anyway. Though it did not mean she would be bringing out her own co-host, Nizu said no initially when she asked before the festival began. But after present Mike running his mouth like he did, Nizu said they needed a distraction from it. So, Mirko, her very adorable and especially so when embarrassed wife, came onto the stage confident as usual, until Midnight gave her fluffy tail a playful little squeeze, almost earning a yelp. "Okay everyone, I hope you can still get up where it counts?" Midnight questioned, licking her lips for effect as most of the boys went red-faced with a few of the girls joining them. Now normally we would only give you all a 10-minute break before the next event begins. But due to the more challenging than originally designed obstacle course, you will all get 30 minutes to recover your stamina for this one, she said, making them feel relieved till she continued to talk, bringing back the tension. "'Cause after I explain the event and you get 5 minutes to choose your partner before your break will begin. And when it ends, I expect you all to move yourselves ball deep into this event," she said, making a small uproar among the crowd and causing the students to almost all go red in the face a second time. In said crowd, there was a section cut off from the others specifically for up till now too, but with Maple it had become 3 different cults sharing the section. It was made a little bigger than last year due to the newest cult. There was something amusing to see them taking advice from their seniors in the fields of cults about how to conduct themselves in public settings like this. Though they were referred to as cults by the public, they were legally classified as religions despite their fanatic approaches to worship. Though when you consider how insane and unstable the beginning of the Quirk era was and still is, it made sense. If this meant rounding fanatics into bigger and easier to keep an eye on groups, then most governments did not mind so long as they did not break any laws. In fact, just like the hero agencies who got to buy seats in advance and got a separate parking area, so did they. Naturally there was still some old school religions from before the era of Quirks, but due to Quirks most religions had died out or had begun to greatly fade away in place of new ones centered around Quirks. The oldest of the cults was naturally for Nizu, who called themselves scholars of the rat god. Fortunately when he told them no living human sacrifices they obliged. For any who knew this, both understood why he was okay with it, but was also terrified that he gave them a thumbs up to desecrate human corpses. The term rat god was not a nickname the staff called him by for his ability to handle problems, that is for sure. Then the second oldest among them was Midnight's own cult, whose name was so inappropriate that it must literally be censored in any place that the public can see it. It was obvious what they were about. The only trouble they had ever caused Nizu in the slightest was them wearing the bare minimum clothing required in public. Even then the animal waved it off as there were worse things in the world for children to see than a little bit of skin. This was why they, rather than a sound-dampening tent for any rituals like the others, had to put together a soundproof shed for better or worse. Then finally was Maple Cult, who was only about a year old now in terms of official religion status by the government. Finding out she had a BLD quirk, they based their faith around those with BLD quirks being considered blessed like their so-called goddess. As well as advocate for quirk discrimination victims, even offering such people temporary homes till they find a more stable living situation. Like how Nizu cult was more about obtaining higher tiers of knowledge in whatever field they were specialized in. As well as assisting animal rights groups in protecting quirked animals from quirk labs across the country and a good portion of the world. Or how Midnight's cult, with a slightly less noble goal of seeking pleasure and free love while ironically assisting SXL/SLT victims. Not even Nizu can wrap his head around how they can do so as effectively as they do, but decided it is better not to waste time fixing something that was working just fine. For Maple, in her case the cult that worshipped her was known as the Bloody Faithful. They were much nicer and nowhere near as BLD thirsty as their name would suggest. Back to Midnight, she began her explanation of the next event that was to come. This year we are combining 2 previous events into a brand new one. Midnight said, getting the crowd excited at the mention of 2 old events with enough of a twist to be called a new event. This one is called Racing Pillars. The rules are rather simple. 2 competitors will form a team where one drives an electric chariot from our chariot race event in a previous year. As for the other competitor, they will have to stand on top of a pillar in the inner area of the track, and before any potential racers get any funny ideas, they cannot attack them as there will be a wall between the two groups of competitors. She said that as she saw a few competitors look sad at the idea of helping their partners from the chariots as they raced around. Mirko stomped strong, getting their focus again before she continued her wife's explanation of the event. "Alright, you little fluff ball, listen up. For every lap you successfully complete, your partner's starting pillar goes up by 5 feet. If your partner inside the walls touches the ground by falling off of the pillar, or the pillar they are standing on sinks into the ground, both of you are eliminated with your starting pillar being removed. Every 2 minutes the pillars will be lowered by 5 feet automatically thanks to Cementos. This means that for you to cancel out the height decrease you would need to complete 1 lap in 2 minutes. Not impossible but not exactly easy either. The following chart will display to you how the starting heights for the pillars are calculated based off the combined team's point values." Mirko said, wondering how her wife or present Mike could talk for that long without stopping. These points shocked the students as they had noticed the heights connected to them, especially the lowest points. This meant that those who did not make it past 100 points would be in significant danger as they would only have 8 minutes of standing time to start with. As such, they would be forced to fight their ways up the others' pillars if their partners could not keep up with the fall of the pillars. However, they still did not know how the points for the individuals were calculated, so for all they knew this was just to scare a little with the 20 feet height. Now for the points you all earned based off where you placed in the race. Though we were quite surprised to see so many ties for the higher placing spots. Now without any further delays, here is how you scored and who seemingly got the major advantage for the second event. Midnight added, keeping an eye out for those who got the hidden message. Point placements for second event. 01, Reina Lopez 10, 0000000p. 02, Izukumidoriya 350p. 03, Shoto Todoroki / Mina Ashido 345p. 05, Jirota Shishida 335p. 06, Pony Tsunatori 330p. 07, Maple Usagiyama / Himiko Toga 325p. 09, Fumikage Tokoyami 315p. 10, Mizo Shoji 310p and the rest. The massive differences in height and by extension time between the 10th placement ranges and the 5th placement ranges for the point totals were startling to say the least. Even though it was a mere 30 feet difference between bottom and middle placements. With 5 feet being lost every 2 minutes, that gave them a 12-minute difference for anyone trying stall on their pillars defending it. That was of course not even considering the differences between the even higher placement ranges on the list that went beyond 5th. Granted, the amount of points needed to reach them was quite large, so the students were curious how many would even end up forming teams to reach those advantages. Well, the non-hero course students anyway, as most of the hero course students had a rough idea of who would end up partnering with who. With that, you all have 30 minutes to rest, so find a partner and make a game plan. 'Cause once we have 32 people eliminated, the next event will begin after a lunch break. Mirko said, wishing internally that her wife would not try to cop a feel of her but on a public stage. Luckily Inizu did not allow cameras except the ones attached to phones in the stadium, but made sure to put a cell jamming signal in the stadium that completely disabled all non-registered phones while active. So, the only cameras were the ones controlled by UA that Power Loader had his students guiding, telling them when to SWCH to close-ups of Midnight's or Mirko face. As one can easily imagine, all hell had broken loose among the competitors down there scrambling to find someone to partner with. UA Sports Festival. In a small room. Aizawa, who had pulled his longtime friend present Mike into the room a while ago, was currently talking it out with him. For their sake and not his, as to figure out how they were going to explain their CRP to Nizu without getting a temporary child-sized boot up his butt from his tiny boss. What the hell? Mike. Aizawa said, barely getting the words out with even a sliver of his usual calm in his current frustration with his friend. What has you so bent out of shape? Oh, I know, it is that hobo cosplayer joke I made. Present Mike stated more than asked, obviously trying to brush off this talk as quickly as possible. Grabbing his friend's arm as they tried to walk back to the booth saying they should hurry, Aizawa glared at him strong. I thought you got over what happened already after all of these years of being a hero. Aizawa said in a tone indicating he was now questioning his judgment. The incident he was referring to was shortly after they had graduated from UA together. After finding the villain who was responsible for killing their friend Oboro, Present Mike had confronted them to try and apprehend them. To call it a one-sided fight was an understatement, as they had been unable to hurt them in the slightest due to their opponent's mutant quirk making them immune to his sound attack. It was Aizawa who first got there to help him by taking down the villain while he called for an ambulance. The media arriving shortly after had been inquiring as to why Present Mike had failed when Aizawa stepped in and finished it right away. He had claimed that he merely jumped into the fight to finish off the villain, saying how he got them hurt because of his selfishness. This assistance from Aizawa had left a mark on the voice hero, as his friend had made himself look like an absolute BSTRD to save his reputation. Aizawa had always said he hated the limelight and the less annoyances he had to deal with like groupies like the other heroes, the more he could focus on actual hero work unlike them. For a while he had hated mutant quirks, as all he could think about when he saw one was the villain who killed his friend and got him to permanently damage his other friend's reputation in the eyes of the public. He eventually managed to push it down, as he knew it was not right to blame random people with a mutant quirk for that whole mess. But losing so one-sidedly to the Nomu, even though he knew it was just a genetically altered corpse, it felt like a repeat of his fight from back then. But much worse, as there were higher stakes involved at the time compared to his reckless actions as a young hero. I thought I did, but I was useless against that Nomu without my quirk, and all because the mutant quirks it had managed to physically overpower me. Present Mike said, remembering how he dodged his redirected sound attack by the smallest of margins, only to get himself beaten senseless by it before it ended up tossing him into that building. I can't stack up to fighters like you or mutant quirks, cause I rely on solely the power of my quirk to get me through my fights. He said, shaking before his friend pulled him into the same awkward hug he gave them years back in the hospital when he said he needed to tell the media the truth. Everyone has a weakness, but Oboro would never want you to cloud your judgment with self-pity. I think you need to step back for a while to clear your head. Aizawa said, stepping back as his friend showed he was clearly conflicted on what to do. I agree with you on that, though I understand it was something you did out of trauma and not ill intentions. I still cannot ignore it. Nizu said, making them turn to their boss in shock. Nizu had waited a few moments before he continued. Your comments earlier compared to the students without mutant quirks were on the borderline of discrimination. As a teacher, I cannot allow you to teach any of the students or continue to be the announcer for the rest of the events till you get over your issues. He said in his clear tone that always indicated that he meant business when he said something. They were about to protest when the small animal held out his hand to them to silence them. Do not worry, when it comes to protecting Maple and UA, I will have you stay on campus to do patrols. Mirko will fill in for you as the announcer for the rest of the sport festival, and All Might in his civilian form will teach English in your place, as he is more than qualified when it comes to the language. Until you have been approved by a psychologist that you will not show such behavior again, you will not be allowed to teach. It is either this, or I fire you on the spot, and if lawsuits come against UA cause of you from this, I will throw you under the metaphoric bus to protect UA in order to keep the barely held together peace we currently have. It is up to you which I do. Nizu said, seeing for one of the very few and rare occasions of Eraserhead needing to be held back by Present Mike instead of the other way around. I understand, thank you for this second chance, sir. Present Mike said, bowing his head solemnly at this without his usual vigor. As much as he appreciated his friend wanting to argue for him, the man knew that he crossed a line, almost resulting in dragging UA down with him for his actions that he knew as a hero he should not have done, let alone tolerated from others. Nizu let out a sigh of relief, snapping them both to attention to look to him, seeing one of his few genuine smiles and not the fake one he wears as principal daily. With how very little allies, I am glad to still have you by my side. Keeping all I have done to try and push society to do better on my own is impossible until we deal with the current Hero Public Safety Commission as a whole. Even then, with All for One making his return, I have no time to focus on the future as the present is far too perilous for us to even have a chance with him still around. Nizu said, reminding the two heroes of the real danger behind the scenes that the public does not know about yet. Present Mike was told to join Power Loader and the other support course students in the monitoring room as they could not let the public see him here at the stadium after the SWCH. So instead of playing with his thumbs all day, Nizu decided to use his in-depth knowledge of the broadcasting equipment to assist his colleague and their students with making sure the show runs smoothly. UA Sports Festival. With Nizu before speaking with Present Mike and Eraserhead. As the first event had kicked off, Nizu was about to sigh as he saw a repeat of the endurance race from the quirk apprehension tests. But then something pink caught his eye. It seemed that young Todoroki had teamed up with Ashido once again. Perhaps we will see a new couple be born before summer training even hits us this year? Nizu asked himself out loud, happy for the distraction after his previous arguments with the school board on this. Even if the students all refused to participate, the subtle threat from the HPSC to deem the school unsafe for non-hero course students tied Nizu's hands via a spineless UA school board. Most hero schools did not have general education courses as large as UA, as it was usually deemed as backup hero course student stock if some ever dropped out for one reason or another. So even though not all general education students would be cut, of the 6 classes only 2 would remain as the traditional backup pool to choose from. This was sadly enough to force the school board's hand to make all the students to participate a couple weeks back. Despite him telling them he could do something about it, but in the end, they were businessmen and women, not heroes and heroines. Present Mike, who was the homeroom teacher for one of the general education student classes, agreed with Nizu expanding it like he did. As the UA mark on their records along with the tougher-than-normal classes saw most off to university or high-ranking colleges eventually seeing bright futures. To prove the point, one of the former graduates where the UA General Education course was Japan's ambassador on Island. Who, mind you, was the one maintaining Japan's hero support gear contracts with them for a lot of heroes all across Japan. Just a little below 40% of Japan total heroes, to be more precise, according to the statistics, when he tried to argue back with the HPSC, who did not take her seriously. Both because she was quirkless as well as being a graduate from the general education course. Which, to his amazement, and not in the good way mind you, they had seriously thought anyone with a quirk as well as from a more focused education could do better. The second one he had to give to them for thinking, as it was a logical point to a certain degree, but the quirkless one was a whole other debate altogether for a whole other day. Seeing the teenage duo do something as crazy as surfing on acid to get past the robot and following 2 obstacles. His amusement and the others with him when they saw the students realize they needed a key from behind them on the obstacle track. With him drinking tea and eating biscuits were the leaders of the cults, as he found their company much more enjoyable than those cowards in suits. To his left at the semicircle table was the leader of the cult following him. They referred to him as the Cryptic One within the cult, as that was the title of the leader. His actual name was Peter, and he was an old man of silver hair due to his old age with goatee and connecting mustache. Their eyes were a deep green that had a sharp look to them, fitting for a former Cambridge professor. Dressed in his grayish robes with a hood that Peter had behind his back at the moment, it was opened up right now though, revealing the black dress pants, shiny black dress shoes, and a white long-sleeve dress shirt with a black sleeveless vest over it. Next to Peter were the 2 newcomers, Alucard Bell and Emily Bell, who were effectively both the leaders of the cult. Their family history dated back to Europe, as their ancestors came to Japan after the vampire Quirks hunts began, before Hero Society was an official thing, stabilizing everything. When Maple had shown up, this family along with it business essentially founded the cult, as they found others who agreed that such BLD quirk users needed to be protected. The niece was actually saved by Maple inadvertently after she had shown up as the officers who arrested them over an incident. Since they were BLD quirk users and therefore the obviously guilty liars in their situation, the officers were connected to the two officers Maple accidentally killed. The niece was part of the group that got investigated, and with that all of their cases which set free many victims of quirk biased like them from any trouble. Sadly, the reason the girl parents were not in the picture was that they were killed in prison before they were proven innocent. So, her uncle took her in and using their family company influence founded the group known as the Bloody Faithful, so as to help her spread the message of equality and no villainous quirks. The uncle and niece duo were wearing simple plain bright red long sleeve dress shirts, with the uncle wearing white pants while she wore white shorts. They wore red dress shoes as well. Emily had black hair and green eyes, while her uncle was cleanly bald and had the same green eyes as his niece. Most of the followers wore red in fact, for the obvious reason that they were there to assist other BLD quirk users in need of help. Finally, beside Nizu on his right was Clarabelle, a half-Japanese half-American woman with blonde hair and hazel brown eyes. She was the leader of the cult connected to Midnight. The cultist in their group referred to her as Lady Asmodeus, like how the other three had titles. Right now, she was cooing at the sight of the two students together, rubbing her thighs together in what the others assumed was a vivid daydream. Those two are going to make lots of cute babies together, I already know it. She said, licking the biscuit end facing her mouth before biting down on it strong with a smile. It did not help that Clarabelle as usual was wearing a blue and white sports bra with no shirt, along with a pair of dark blue walking shorts with nothing underneath that she was prepared to pull down. Then kick them aside at a moment notice for an org if the others ever started one out of the scheduled masses of their group. Peter laughed it off as this was the usual for his fellow cult leader, who he was known as one of the most outrageous women across Japan, excluding her goddess Midnight, that is. Maybe so, but one of the two has to pop the question first, Clara. Peter said, seeing her pout at him for popping her bubble. Emily, however, rather than looking at the romance of this scenario, she was more focused on what followed after with the last obstacle. Nizu, noticing this, encouraged her to speak up as it was clear she was hesitating to say something. Well, I mean, is it not a bit much to exhaust their concentration with the second and third obstacles to end it a giant puzzle game? She said, narrowing her eyes at the pink girl struggling through all of them. She did. Though that was more obvious due to her intelligence rather than her mental exhaustion, so her smarter partner had managed to clear them relatively quickly until. You made it so anyone who managed to skip all the obstacles would be punished for it, didn't you? She asked the mouse principal, who merely chuckled his response. Alucard simply sighed at this as he felt the struggle was necessary to weed out those who relied solely on their physical power. That was when he noticed how present Mike was commenting in an almost derogatory way towards mutant quirk users. My apologies Nizu, as we are new here, but I cannot help but feel present Mike is looking down on the mutant quirk users by referring to them as literal animals. He said, unable to hold his peace any longer over the matter, literally shouting before him. Nizu, barely holding back a sigh at this turn of events, knew he would have to deal with it before the next event. Sending Midnight a message through her earpiece that a 30-minute break would be in order to allow a clean SWCH of Mirko and present Mike. I assure you I am about to deal with that little issue. On a different note, though, it looks like someone who was underestimated by their classmates had just claimed herself first place. Nizu said as he recalled her quirk description. Yes, for a teenager something like her power would be easy to forget about compared to the flashy forces of nature amongst her classmates. But for a pro hero, it was quite easy to see how deadly such an ability like hers could be if used to its full potential. Unfortunately for the two lovebirds, it seems Izuku had beaten them as he followed the proper path. Unlike them who decided to recklessly rush ahead. He said, enjoying the shocked looks on their faces as they saw they had claimed third place together, not second. UA Sports Festival. Endeavor. The day to show the world the great power that he cultivated over the years in his son had finally come for the pro hero who looked forward to this for months. Yet after the previous attack, though he would never look weak by saying it out loud to anyone, he wanted his son to not fight today and hide. After seeing the masterful tactics from the enemy on how they expertly divided the forces of the heroes in Mustafu during their attack. So possibly broadcasting his son's current limits was not a safe move for their overall safety. So as a result, he seemed to have surprised his son by telling them to hold back so as to fight at most half strength but try to stick to a fourth. At first his son had tried to rebel against this order from him, but after yelling at him a question that he never thought he would ask his son, they agreed to it at the time. The question they yelled at their son was along the lines of if he wanted his sister Fuyumi to see a news report of him dying to the same villains that attacked UA before. So, when the event started, and his son had frozen the other contestants in place at the start, skipping ahead, he felt it was still going well. At first, he questioned why his son had bothered bringing that pink girl with them. But then he saw how they made it look like they needed her help to get past the robots, so he was satisfied. That girl though has potential, perhaps I should offer her an internship to see if she could make a good sidekick for Shoto? Endeavor asked himself out loud as he leaned against the railing in front of him. Then the camera shifted to the mutant quirk users along with the useless prattling of the loud idiot who decided to waste his time with their tasteless nicknames for jokes. However, a sight which shocked him more than any others in that race, even when his son was revealed to have skipped getting a necessary key to pass, it was the quirk of one izukumidoriya. Seeing the young man turn into a near replica of the giant ice bird he saw attacking UA from the distance that day rattled him ever so slightly. Is that boy the same as the maple girl? If so, then what the hell is that rat thinking by keeping such dangerous quirk users at a hero school? He asked himself out loud before slamming his hands down on the railing in a small burst of flame in anger at the idea of Nizu putting his son in danger like that. This scared the people near him, but he did not care for these noisy sheep opinions. After a few minutes of calming down and thinking, he was able to look at the quirks of the two siblings objectively. Though he hated to admit it, he could not deny that unlike the UA assault incident and the Maple Girl earlier incident, both were now in clear control of their quirks. Granted, he had to admit though they both had powerful quirks, it was clear the Maple Girl, though having the ability to motivate his son, she lacked the bare minimum discipline required of a hero. Unfortunately, the Midoriya boy was a boy and therefore could not produce children with Shoto. Or else he would have considered them a possible wife to produce a stronger and smarter hero than even Shoto could become. This in turn would have allowed his grandchildren an even better chance at surpassing All Might than him or his son ever had. The power the Himiko girl displayed was on par with All Might's own power. In fact, he would have gone as far as to say her quirk was the same as the blonde idiot. Perhaps she is. No, if All Might had a daughter enrolled in UA, he would have already announced it as the symbol of peace to make people feel safer. Endeavor said to himself, trying to persuade himself that his idea was wrong. Though a part of him could not help but cling to the idea, especially when he saw her put on a ridiculous, arrogant, and most of all a non-serious smile like All Might always did whenever he beat a villain. If she did turn out to be related to All Might, then he would have to remove her from the possibility of marriage despite her powerful quirk, as it was clear All Might DNA produced another joke of a hero that always seemed on the edge of making a joke about how much stronger they are than the other heroes. However, when he noticed how the pink girl had managed to convince his son somehow to use his fire, he could not help but grin ear to ear. Even if he could not hear the audio of their conversation, it was clear that her words could impact his son. Her current goofiness aside, it is clear she understands she needs to keep pushing herself to be a great hero. Looks like I really will need to send her an invitation for the internships after all. He mused to himself as he saw potential in her between her drive and powerful yet flexible in terms of usage quirk. It did annoy him a little his son had only claimed third place, but he supposed this was the price he had to pay for telling his son to hold back most of his power so as not to reveal their hand to the villains. UA Sports Festival. Arena Center Field. Unfortunately, Midnight had to send Mirko to assist Aizawa with the play-by-play, something the crowd did not question fortunately. All right people, before we show the pairs and their points, I have a small announcement to make. Mirko said, unsure from the booth before she began humming and writing something down. Not realizing her mic was on the whole time she tried to just go back to it. There is a white van with the following license plate leaking BLD from the door in the cults section of the parking lot. We ask that the one in charge of said van go clean the spilled BLD before it gets over the wheels of the other cultists' cars. Aizawa said in a monotone voice before listing off the plate number. As an embarrassed cult member made their way through the stands apologizing to the others, Mirko began pouting at this. "Why did you cut me off?" Mirko asked in frustration, getting an annoyed sigh from the man for her amateur job. "First off, everyone heard you scribbling down notes from what Power Loader told you over your earpiece. Secondly, you took too long to tell them all. Leave the announcement to me while you just stick to commentating on the fighting, okay?" Aizawa told her as he just barely dodged a roundhouse kick that just swept past his head. With this little show getting a good laugh out of the audience. Midnight went to showing the scores before her wife accidentally swore on global television. Not that it would be too much of a problem, but still less paperwork in the end was still less paperwork. Chariot/pillar/point total. 01, Reina Lopez /Shurhai Kurwaro /10, 000, 135p. 02, Shoto Todoroki /Mina Ashido /690p. 03, Jirota Shishida /Izukumidoriya /685p. 04, Pony Tsunatori /Himiko Toga /655p. 05, Fumikage Tokoyami /Mizo Shoji /625p. 06, Maple Usagiyama /Momo Yayorozu /585p. 07, A. Tetsu /Nido Monoma /510p. 07, B. Kyoka Jiro Achiko /510p. 09, Tenya Ida /Tsuyu Azui /465p. 10, Random SCSA /Random SCSB /450p and the rest. Everyone in all courses was surprised to see the usual duo of Maple and Himiko not working together, looking at them and their partners. All Maple could do was laugh and rub the back of her head, as for once in her life she could read the metaphoric room. They were all in properly. "I just really wanted to have fun playing against Pony and Himi," Maple said, unsure of how else to answer it. Momo chuckled as she shook her head at the ever-so-Maple-like response to the unspoken question. "To make sure these three don't get out of hand in the fighting round, I partnered up with Maple to help keep the chaos to a minimum," Momo said, speaking the truth, as she really did worry about Maple taking a fight too far in her excitement. No one batted an eye at the two people who both got third place working together, or the others like them claiming the same spot coming together to double their points. Not to mention seeing so many people in the top 20 of the 64 of them pairing up together for the same reason of higher points doing the same. After all, it was logical thinking that the more points you had the better your advantage would be for this event. But then what really shocked most of the audience was so many support course students getting higher scores than a lot of the hero course students. Those who knew better, such as most of the pro heroes and the support companies, knew how easy it was to use high-quality support gear as a substitute for a good quirk. It also helped to back up their opinions, as most of the support course students seemed to have worked out partnerships in advance based off of the teamwork from the obstacle course. In the past, the HPSC would have been upset at the sight of seeing so many non-hero course students making it to the second round. However, unlike past years, this year was the first to have over 20 extra spots than there were hero course students. So, they had no problems with this many fools make it this far into the sports festival. No, the reason they were upset now was that so many hero course students were getting outdone by the support course students. In their opinion, quirks, especially powerful and flashy ones, were supposed to be superior to support gear. But seeing so many students place highly solely due to their gear instead of their quirks sent a bad message in their opinion. It sent the message that anyone can be a hero despite their quirk. This was not something they believed in, mainly because of the flashy and powerful quirks they try to focus on. Focusing on such quirks helped to distract the public from the minor mistakes that were made by them and heroes on a daily basis, as well as the major ones. As for the school board's take on this, it was the same as Nizu, though they lacked the courage to go up against the HPSC. They, like Nizu, believed in their students. They could not care less about the quirk someone has or doesn't have so long as they were a boon to UA, which Nizu's suggestion to not just expanding the general education course, but to also let quirkless kids apply to the hero course allowed them to scoop up plenty of talent they would have had to give away to other schools. Because of Nizu, they had a direct connection with an ambassador on Island, which was, as said before, was a great boon for them in terms of reputation as well as connections. It was because of these connections that they were able to get their AI for the school made by some of the scientists of Island in the first place. Though they were proud of their hero course students, as businessmen and women they were much prouder of the support course. As the support course led to literal business talks with companies for school sponsorships and future hero costumes for the hero course being made by the best companies at cheaper rates than most other hero schools. So, to see them and their inventions catch so much attention this year was something they quite liked. With most of the HPSC board members still fuming in their chairs back at their main headquarters, Nizu along with UA board eagerly awaiting to see what came next in the sports festival. The crowd was about to burst at the seams from waiting for the action to kick off. Midnight had begun gathering the students in place to begin, just like in a typical race those with a higher spot would start closer to the starting line. Cementos had raised the pillars slightly earlier so that numbers and in some cases, letters as well were added to the columns. The circular center was divided into 10 sections, with pillars falling into one of the 10 categories placed in each section. First, he raised the walls after letting the pillar people get in the center, that way the racers would not know where their partners were in the middle or who was near them. Once everyone was on their pillars he raised them accordingly, with the wall standing at 120 feet tall no one could see the highest pillar. With that done and the racers in place the 10-second countdown commenced. Alright racers, remember no lethal force when using your quirks, same goes for the students on the pillars. And keep in mind once we are down to 16 teams the race will come to an end. Now if my little chocolate bunny would do the honors. Midnight said, enjoying the embarrassed sputtering of her wife in the announcer booth for a few seconds before they calmed down. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go. Mirko announced as the chaos began with, not who people thought it would be. UA Sports Festival. On the racetrack. The one who people, both audience and teachers alike had expected to cause chaos at the start was Maple based off of the fiery hell she easily made earlier. Members of the audience would have considered Izuku as well, but as far as they were concerned, he stuck behind that wall unable to attack anyone racing. Teaching staff however after his earlier accident figured it would be foolish to let their guard down just because a mere wall separated him from half of the competitors. What not even they could predict though was Izuku opening gambit of launching a wave of icicles from above making obstacles in the racecourse. This caused most of the competitors to come to a screeching halt as soon as they started smashing into each other damaging their chariots. His partner however, knew this was coming and due to their planning knew exactly where each icicle would fall, allowing him to race forward. Maple and Pony however ditched their rides as their partners agreed earlier at crossing the line in the chariot was not necessary. His attack, however, was like a bucket of cold water to the excited audience sending most of them watching into confusion as whether or not if this was allowed. UA Sports Festival. Outside of the racetrack. With the audience in a fit over Izuku's direct assault on the racers from the safety of the walls the teachers had to make a ruling on the attack. Not to mention the trouble Maple and Pony were causing among the crowd by running on all fours instead of their chariots. As such a secret conference between Midnight, Cementos, Mirko, Aizawa, and Nizu commenced. This was done over a separated line that the announcer mic, referee mic, and Nizu phone were all switched to with their earbuds included so they could hear each other. After a bit of deliberation it was determined that Izuku's attack was completely legal, though dangerous if done by an individual of even the slightest less intelligence than him or Nizu. With a tired sigh they switched back to the regular line for Aizawa to deliver the verdict, as he was more aesthetically suited to deliver a technical explanation. The rules never stated individuals inside the walls could not attack those outside of it, only that they had to remain in it. Also, it was clear that it was a calculated attack based on how his partner was able to predict the landing spots of the icicles. Aizawa said, seeing the audience calm down. Many among the audience and viewers from elsewhere were confused as to why someone with a strong quirk like his would be in the support course and not the hero course. However, to reveal that information to the world would end up putting a target on his back, one that they could not protect him from PRD. Also, among the crowd were quirkists who disliked mutant quirks or so-called villainous quirks, as a result cussing out both young ladies. Making stray comments about how they are behaving like beasts and how a hero should win in a more heroic or fair way. As for Maple Usagiyama and Pony Tsunatori ditching their chariots, Aizawa said, cutting through the chatter like a hot knife through butter, pausing for a brief few seconds to let the audience feel his anger sink in. There is nothing in the rules stating they need to cross the starting line in their chariots. So what they are doing is not just fair, but also logical, as their natural strength is not only far faster than the chariot but they can dodge attacks more easier that way. He said, feeling his eye twitch at the ridiculousness of having to remind people that it made more sense to fight at full strength than handicap yourself. To prove his point, in 1 minute the two had already done a full lap, with Jirota Shishida and Shoto Todoroki a little over halfway done. Fortunately for all of them, he had restrained Mirko, who was about ready to tell them put their mouths to better use and call them a certain W word that she should not be calling the audience. Everyone else was stuck at beginning getting unstuck, while Maple and Pony charged through them, making it even worse for most of the other competitors. A lucky few were set free, finally starting their race just as 2 minutes hit, lowering their partners' chances. As well as catching sight of the two boys from earlier crossing the line before them, saving their teammates from getting lowered. UA Sports Festival. On the racetrack. Back to the race, Maple and Pony held the undisputed lead like in the previous race, only due to them ditching the chariots. Todoroki had managed to catch up to his opponent Shishida earlier but was now stuck right behind due to the obstacles Izuku made at the start. He caught up earlier by making an ice ramp and using his flames to both push himself forward off of it but weaken it. Sadly, he could not do the same track every time, as all the water build up on the track, as well as how tiring this would be to do so. When two competitors tried to use it, the thing broke on them, trapping them under ice and broken chariots for trying to use someone else's escape method. The two boys had soon fallen behind the girls, as proven by them passing them by doing another lap at the first 2-minute mark, getting a lead for their team. UA Sports Festival. Inside the wall of the racetrack. The pillar situation was quite an odd one, but one no one could do much about it. It did not help that as soon as the race started, Izuku had launched icicles into the racetrack. Many complained about Izuku attacking their partners, but he just brushed them off with a single response. The rules never said I could not attack them, now did they? Izuku pointed out that he and his partner agreed it was a valid tactic so long as Izuku remained in the wall. Momo for her part was in awe at Izuku's ability to see through such an obvious rule before anyone else. However, unlike him, she could not attack them, as she assumed he calculated the angle of those falling icicles earlier to avoid hitting his partner. No one moved, nor activated their quirks after that, till suddenly Reina, Himiko, and Momo all got their pillars raised by 5 feet, shocking everyone as the 2-minute alarm did not go off yet. A minute later that were all taken out of shock when everyone else's sank except the previous 3, along with Izuku and Mina pillars, who rose 5 feet first then got lowered by 5 feet. It was after this when the fighting began amongst them all, with a few immediately going after the big fish with their support gear. The support student from Team 10 had decided to go after Momo since they were placed right across from each other with only 10 feet in height separating them. If they waited too long they feared the gap would increase, so they used their gear to latch themselves to the side of her pillar. Then used a separate support item to try to restrain her, not knowing, unlike the hero students, that she was a one-woman ammunition factory. The end result was her throwing a flash grenade without a pin at them as she made herself headphones to block out the noise and special sunglasses to handle the light. Unfortunately for them, the pained yelp they managed to hold back as they concentrated still came out as Momo unceremoniously kicked them off of the pillar they were struggling to hold onto. Naturally, the other competitors did not help him stay up as they helped shove him down faster to the ground whenever he tried to hold on to them. With this, his attempt to try to retrain and throw down Momo off of her pillar ended before it could begin. Team 10 was now eliminated. UA Sports Festival. Inside the announcer booth. With the crowd already on the edge of their seats from the race finally getting really started, they were now cheering their lungs out in excitement at these newer developments. Mirko not one to disappoint decided to get started before Aizawa gave a boring explanation on what Ponytail Girl finally did. Not only did she stop his attack, but she kicked his sorry butt out of here. Mirko shouted, putting an emphasis on the last three words for full effect. And full effect it did have, as the crowd was cheering for Girl even louder now. However, more followed as two more teams were eliminated shortly after. Shows them for thinking she was easy pickings just because she did not have a tough-looking quirk. Mirko responded in an almost mockery-like tone to the fools who attacked her. Unfortunately for her, despite her attempt to not sound happy, Aizawa could see the proud look on her face as though what happened was a result of her efforts somehow. Aizawa decided it was time to intervene and give the audience a more technical explanation. Was getting started on telling them. Toru Hagakure, her quirk is a mutant type that constantly refracts light, causing her body to be invisible. However, do not think for a moment that it is as simple as that. To a degree, she can control how strongly it gets refracted, allowing for intense bursts of light. Though her specialty is in stealth, she is by no means a slouch when it comes to close quarters combat. After all, when you're fighting someone and you suddenly lose your eyesight, the battle becomes near impossible to win for most. He said as the crowd marveled at his speech of his a seemingly non-offensive quirk can make an impact in a fight. Many pro heroes in the audience agreed with him as they too remembered the time such a thing happened to them in the field. As he said, for most heroes, losing their eyesight even for a moment only could mean the difference between life and death against many villains. For many of the civilians who thought of heroes as more than mere humans just thought the man was making an excuse for his own past actions. Almost all forgetting at some point that before getting to train, the heroes were just normal civilians like them. Luckily, there were some level-headed civilians in the audience who could still understand the fact that heroes were still humans at the end of the day. UA Sports Festival. Inside the wall of the racetrack. Toru, who was unsure of what to do, suddenly heard shouts as the two boys beside her tried to attack her where she stood. In a panic, she unleashed a flash of light, blinding them, then delivering a roundhouse kick she was taught by Mirko-sensei one afternoon when she came into school during the 2 weeks off. The two boys did not know what hit them as they fell to the ground, getting both general education teams 31A and 31B eliminated. With that, 3 teams had now been eliminated, and the pillars of Izuku, Momo, and Mina rose up again along with a certain empty pillar. The other teams momentarily fell before rising once again, along with the previously mentioned teams getting an even further lead, scaring them to get their butts into gear. Ibara Shiozaki stayed rooted on her pillar without concern as she trusted her partner to keep her at her elevated level. As a result, she was unamused by the 2 support course teams that tried to take her down from the pillar by using their gadgets to try and cut through her vines. With a huff, she swatted them off, as she continued to glare at Momo Yaoyorozu for clearing falling into lust and temptation by one Maple Usagiyama. Fortunately for both teams 25A and 25B who she eliminated, they were not alone in leaving the game. Senkaibara had knocked Koji Koda off of his platform despite the pigeons Koda sent to try and knock him off his platform in retaliation to the start of their attack. This meant that Team 28 was also eliminated, as well as the first Hero Course team to get knocked out of the running. With this, 6 teams had been eliminated, and the same pattern had occurred as before with the pillars, except some were not going back up until after 30 seconds had gone by rather than the scant 3 or 5. This made the intensity go up yet again as people began to realize that their teammates may have had their chariots destroyed. Now they had to try and do what the chariots did but on foot. Needless to say, panic and more intense battles began occurring inside the wall as they also tried to balance on the pillars. UA Sports Festival. On the race track. While half of the students were duking it out on the pillars inside the wall, the other half were racing around them in circles outside of the wall. Not knowing what was happening except for the sound of explosions, flashes of light, and a few screams. It did help them in order to somewhat guess what was going on based on the students outside being forced to leave the track due to their teammates' elimination. It did not help that Maple and Pony were accidentally breaking some chariots that got in their way, forcing the people on them to attempt to run the track on foot. Though some managed to pass the line with only 30 seconds behind the needed time at first, this was where the true problem began. As from now on they had to run the whole track on foot. As a result, the 2-minute time even for the most athletic of them essentially doubled. It would take even longer for those who did not have speed/strength enchantment quirks or those who were physically strong to begin with. While the others were panicking, though Maple, Pony, and Reina, who the previous two had caught up with, are currently enjoying the race too much to notice. Reina's competitive and yet playful nature was on par with them. As a result, all three were currently going full throttle unrestrained. To the point where Reina teammate Pillar had almost gone over the wall by now, with Maple and Pony teammates Pillars catching up to that same point as well. Reina teammate fortunately had abandoned their pillar and hid in the shadow of the one competitor they knew would not hit the ground. UA Sports Festival. Inside the announcer booth. In the announcer booth, the two heroes had turned off both of their mics so as to not broadcast their concern to the audience. Naturally, they initiated a group call with Nizu, Power Loader, and Midnight, although she could not risk speaking, so all she could do was listen and give signals to agree or disagree. Cementos was required to keep his full focus on the event as his quirk was the foundation for half of it. Am I the only who noticed the constant glare Shiozaki has been giving Yaoyorozu since the second event began? Aizawa asked, hoping this was one of the few times he was wrong and misread the situation. Trust me, you're not seeing things. One of the camera angles we are not showing to the audience is showing me that as well. Power Loader said, confirming his coworker worries. Well, since all four of us with views of the inside of the wall are seeing the same thing, I suggest we take some countermeasures for the next round, as we are too late to do anything this round. Do you agree, Midnight? Nizu said, hiding his concern for if she turns violent suddenly, as well as asking for Midnight opinion. Midnight gave the signal of yes to his question by tapping her thigh with her left hand for the others to see. Even so, you think after the attack on UA she would have gotten over her religious obsession already? Mirko asked the others, unsure of why the problem was yet resolved. I figured after the attack she would have gotten past it as well. Looks like my sit back and watch approach at the beginning of the year may have been the wrong move. Aizawa said, sighing as he blamed himself right now for the current problem brewing before their eyes. It is not your fault, Aizawa, nor did you approach it the wrong way. If they had regular classes between the sports festivals and the announcement like they usually would, then your approach would have worked. Nizu told his most important teacher as they were being too HRD on themselves. Nizu is right, you could not have predicted the absence that occurred after the UA attack. Midnight, tell him he is being too HRD on himself. Power Loader said, asking Midnight to help convince him. Naturally she agreed with their logic, as she also felt his slow approach was the best way to deal with an overzealous religious student. So, she signaled yes to them, hoping Aizawa would stop being so HRD on himself for the few minor mistakes he made. Especially when in comparison to the hundreds of mistakes the rest of the staff has made over the years at UA to his few. Alright, for the combat round I suggest we place them as far apart as possible without drawing the suspicion of Shiozaki. She may be a religious zealot but is by no means stupid. We will discuss how far apart we can put them after this round is over if she makes it through. Nizu told them, receiving a round of agreements from them all. After all, it was well known by all of them he purposely rigged 2 to at most ever 4 of the 8 starting matches. This was to make sure the less combat-oriented students still got the chance to show off, or that students who needed to face certain opponents to broaden their perspectives got said fight at least once during the combat portion tournament. Though there were cases like this where they tried to purposely prevent two students from fighting as long as possible to try and avoid a disaster of a fight. Switching the mic back on as soon as the call ended, Aizawa gave out a warning to the audience. Now that the hero course has shed metaphoric BLD with the first hero course team being eliminated, the fighting is going to get much more intense, people. This is where the second event really begins, as people can no longer wait to make their move. Aizawa told them as the crowd got excited again at the news that the action would get more intense. That being said, it was not just inside the wall where the fighting was getting intense, but the racetrack as well. Tokyo Mirko apartment. Random male narrator, as the days went by, and the cold weather was coming in. A soft blanket of white, lovingly embraced the city for all who lived within. And in all the homes, families were preparing both food and toys. For when the day came, they would get fat and share their joys. That included a special family, with one little demonic beast. Maple. Izuku exclaimed as he saw his sister accidentally slurp up a string of Christmas lights meant for the tree, with everyone turning to look at her. With Mirko and Midnight poking their heads out of the kitchen while Himiko popped up from behind the couch holding origami snowflakes. All three then began to laugh when Maple burped with smoke coming out of her mouth from the plastic part of the lights reacting to her stomach acids badly. Or rather, what had them laughing was not the burp itself but the tiny light bulbs getting stuck sticking out of her nose, lighted by her flames she would have normally snorted. With a sigh, Izuku was about to help her pull them out when suddenly she sneezed strong, causing not just the two visible lights but all the lights to come out. Fortunately, he ducked out of the way and Mirko grabbed an empty ceramic bowl in time to catch them all as they slid into place. With each one holding a small flame lighting the inside and sliding into perfect place, Mirko was now holding a bowl filled with what looked like a perfectly arranged set of bright Christmas lights. Well, this is definitely going to be our centerpiece for when everyone arrives, if it is still lit by then. Mirko said as she quickly set down the now hot bowl, with everyone including Izuku this time laughing. Random male narrator, these pleasant days would not last, however, as in this snowfall not all was clear. For a grumpy reindeer and their laughing Santa Claus were about to add some names to their naughty list this year. Mustafu charity event. Shota Aizawa, who was wearing a reindeer onesie due to his wife making him do so for this charity, was currently holding himself back from glaring at a 3-year-old who just shoved a carrot in his mouth. Meanwhile, his wife was taking pictures with the slightly older kids of around 5 to 7 years old while turning back to snicker at him. With them were the two people from Iwabumi agency, models only of course, helping with the event as well as their first solo job. According to the fashion hero, this was a little test to see if they could accompany her on her next charity event, something all her models/heroes had to do to prove themselves. Granted, it was a different charity event each time she tested someone, but all were relatively the same size. Seeing the look of the young man sighing, as he was dressed as an elf being used as basically a jungle gym by the kids like he was, had made the underground hero feel sympathy and pity for the young, as Iwabumi told him was dating/living with her other model she sent here, the one being tested. Though not overly happy and laughing like his own wife. With a fiery passion, she exuded pure confidence and was giving praises to the children, causing them to enthusiastically agree to be good kids. Hang in there, buddy, it will get better when you get home and your wife makes it up to you. Aizawa said, giving the young man advice as the two women and the civilian hired Santa managed to gather all the children to them for a few minutes. Wife, the young man exclaimed, almost spitting out his warmed water at the implication the two of them would get married or even are married. Trust me, kid, me and my wife were just like you too, it will happen eventually, so you may as well brace yourself for stuff like this. Aizawa responded, unable to stop himself from grinning at the naivety of youth. Why did I let her talk me into doing a charity event for Christmas? Aizawa thought exhaustedly as he remembered when she first brought him the job offer for them. Wanting heroes there as security but not wanting to make it obvious, the host of the charity event asked them if they could wear costumes. Logically speaking, he understood, as he did not want to risk the chance of any villains who, just like fighting heroes, ruin the event for the children. As the security guards on site would be enough to deter any petty thefts, as they had gotten special permits to use their quirks for this job with a warning sign saying so. However, now he was shown why the company CEO who arranged this public gift-giving event had asked them to be there. A group of 20 or so men drove in on 4 different pickup trucks, where a little over half of them began using a wide variety of quirks and regular lifting to grab the presents. The remainder of them meanwhile had shotguns aimed at the guards, knocking them out one by one as they surrendered, not expecting armed robbers. Aizawa was relieved when he saw the young man hold back his girlfriend from confronting them. Though he doubts she would have been reprimanded for using her fire quirk to hurt them as they were pointing guns at her. Still, it made his next task easier as he got her to huddle up with the children and parents, out of the way. Aizawa ran forward, catching his scarf that his wife threw to him that she was wearing this whole time. Unleashing his scarf as he quickly put it on, he grabbed an empty chair with it and threw it to block the gunfire. Obviously, he rolled under the chair to fully avoid the shots, leaping forward into a kick after he stopped rolling. Noticing that his wife was getting the civilians out, he could not help but smirk as he took down another criminal. He did this by using his scarf to grab and throw them despite having his back turned to them at the moment he did so. "Dudmn furry," one of the men said, frustrated that Aizawa was taking them down. Pushing the gun aside, he gracefully slid past them, then put pressure on their arm, causing them to drop the gun. He then held the criminal against him to use him as a human shield now that he has a solid hold on both of their arms. "Fire at and your friend dies with me," Aizawa stated coldly yet firmly at them all. This caused them all to stop for a few brief moments, enough for his wife to now join him. Throwing him forward, Aizawa then kicked them into the last partner of his that was standing. As his wife took down the 3, she snuck up on. Sadly, the ones who oversaw the presents had managed to finish grabbing them and drove off to safety for them. By the time the police and other heroes got there, the criminals were long gone. Even so, he would settle for the fact that no one died today. But not a certain pair of brown eyes that gleamed with both great interest, as well as bloodlust. A pair of eyes that Aizawa just barely noticed but could not chase after to confirm were there. Random male narrator. Thus began the start of a great holiday adventure, for Santa and friends. Fortunately for them, all the watchful elves would help them to assist the naughty children in making amends. Would Santa and her reindeer manage to chase down the naughty children in time to save Christmas? How would the little demonic beast get involved to save someone's butt? And most of all, what other Christmas decorations would on the menu for the little demonic beast? But fret not, dear readers, as all the questions, or the first 2, would get answered at the very least. Now off we must go to the helpful elves' workshop to find out more about the shiny toys the naughty children left behind. Mustafu Police Station. The police officers of Mustafu this year did a contest to decide what they would wear, as they were divided into 3 groups. One group wanted to go with Santa hats, another wanted to wear reindeer antlers, and finally one group wanted to wear elf ears. The elf ear group ended up winning, with the players for the other 2 having to put on elf costumes for the amusement of the others as a penalty. Though they naturally got changed back into their uniforms after a few pictures, as they still needed to be ready and on duty. Detective Naomasa Tsukachi let out a long sigh, pitching the bridge of his nose after coming out of the last interrogation room. Normally he hates it when people are tight-lipped or try to lie to him like an idiot, wasting his time by trying to give him false answers. But this time, they did the absolute worst thing he hates when it comes to interrogating people. "Did you get any useful information?" Aizawa asked, now dressed in a thin yet well-insulated winter coat that was currently open. "No, I didn't," they knew nothing. Only the getaway drivers in the pickup trucks knew where to drop the presents off and who it was they worked for. They also were the ones who apparently gave them the guns, which are, a bit odd to say the least, the detective said, catching his attention, but someone spoke before he could. "What do you mean odd?" Aizawa said, smiling as she wrapped her arms around her husband's chest from behind with her head poking out from beside his arm. Waving them over to follow him, they did so. Once they got to the armory, they were shown the weapons. Confused as to why they had them stored here and not in a more secure evidence locker like usual. These guns were made by some kind of metal-shaping quirk with what looks like an extremely high amount of skill. Yet the gun designs themselves clearly show whoever made them is at best a complete novice when it comes to guns, as they are barely functional. He said, getting surprised looks from the married couple just like he did when he was told the same after they were examined. "What the hell is this?" Aizawa said in a confused tone as he physically examined one of the guns himself after he was given the clear to do so. If a villain with such a powerful quirk and such advanced control over it, then why are they so bad at guns? Emi said out loud what they all were thinking, none of them able to wrap their heads around it. Going by this, you would think they only knew how to make blunt weapons or swords. And last I checked, we did not have a medieval fantasy group of villains running around. Aizawa said, shaking his head as he put the gun down. Exactly, this is far too confusing to understand. Naturally, we are checking the quirk database for such abilities. But with so many people going all over Japan to celebrate Christmas, we are going to have trouble tracking them down. At best, one of them suddenly decided to become a high-ranked criminal and we can still easily stop them. But if they did, then it would make more sense for them to wait till they can make better guns and then sell those. He said as the two heroes understood his logic about if the quirk user was the villain, then this whole mess made no sense. Worst as well as the more likely scenario, one of them was a child who got kidnapped by a criminal and is now being forced to make weapons for them. The fact that these men were sent to steal Christmas presents using these guns, and if you're correct, Eraserhead were being watched, does not help much for weakening this theory. As it is highly likely they used such a ridiculous target to test the guns to slow us down. By forcing us to waste resources looking for these presents to calm down the CEO. Detective Naomasa said with a slight hint of worry in his voice before one of them decided to crack a joke. So does this mean Mirko is going to adopt another abused/traumatized child with a powerful quirk? Emi asked, giggling for a moment before realizing they were giving her blank looks. Oh. Ooh. Sorry about that, so which one of us is going to call Mirko and Midnight with the news? She realized that they were trying to avoid saying that out loud so they would have an excuse to dump the child on Mirko at the end more easily. Her husband then shoved his cell phone into her hand, knowing Midnight would never risk ignoring a call from him in case it was an emergency. Thus, answering her question. "We will be in the break room, I will save you a jelly-filled donut," Aizawa said to her as he and Naomasa kept walking ahead to said room to get a relaxing cup of coffee in before they began searching for both the gifts as well as the child or criminal, as the presents should give them a trail to follow towards them. Random male narrator, as the adults let their passions loose, and the children prepare for the big day of holiday cheer. A certain chocolate bunny was receiving a call that interrupted the basting of her holiday goose. With that said, this was truly an important call. For it was from a very nervous Santa, with normally the best news of all. As they were about to give her a Christmas present, that the stork would be more suited to deliver. Also, there was no time to notify the dutiful bird, so it will be up to Santa, as the elves and her reindeer both passed the phone to her. Unfortunately for Santa's reindeer, trouble brewed behind the scenes. As this brew was not the hearty rich roast they would have rather seen. Tokyo Mirko apartment. Mirko, who was currently sharing an embrace with Midnight, who just licked some of the chocolate cake mix from the bowl before washing it, was happy. Blissfully, you could even say, which is why when she got the call and had to break the embrace she was annoyed. "Hello, who is this?" Mirko asked, unable to step a when her wife nibbled on her neck as punishment for breaking the embrace. "This is Emi, we might need your help," she said, getting the attention of the two women as Midnight was close enough to hear the phone. "Need our help? But shouldn't your secret guard job for that present-giving event be done by now?" Mirko said as she turned slightly to look at the clock, suppressing her yelp and the urge to jump. Midnight did not like being on the receiving end of neglect play. So, she wanted to get wife's attention back on her with the phone turned off as soon as possible. The thing is, you're going to find it totally funny. But some guys with what appeared to be quirk-made guns attacked the event and well you see. Emmy, despite her attempt to sound her normal carefree self, knew she was failing at it. The grunt from Mirko who sounded like she was predicting what was going to happen already gave her a bad gut feeling. Based on the weapon's quality we believe there is a good chance a kidnapped child with a powerful quirk might be the one who made them. As such we were hoping you could help by getting ready to take in the child if their parents are dead. She said, almost dropping the phone when Mirko sighed before cussing her out on the other end, before saying they would be right over to help them. Hey mom, what made you so upset? Also why is mother staring at the house phone like she wants to see it explode? Izuku asked as his two sisters also poked their heads into the kitchen. To answer your second question first, we just got interrupted by a very annoying call and will now need to do some hero work. As for your first question, there is a chance that you will be getting another sibling. Mirko said with a sigh as her children gave her the responses she expected. What? Izuku exclaimed in exhaustion at the idea of their family getting any bigger. Really? Maple asked, holding her hands together with her eyes practically sparkling at the idea of an even younger sibling than Izuku coming in. Yay! Himiko was jumping up and down clapping her hands together excited at the idea of maybe adding another boy to the house. Not that she would be upset if they were a little sister, but she just likes the idea of having another little brother more. Random male narrator, and with the announcement of another child, all the others, minus Izuku, were overflowing with glee. Just like that, the two mothers left to find and pick up this new child before they could flee. Not knowing what would be in store for them, they would soon come to lament, or probably not. For the ending Christmas adventure, would be decided by someone with only ever the best intent. Mustafu. With Mirko. Random male narrator, all throughout the city, little rodents known as heroes scurried about. Looking for shiny toys and lots of colorful boxes, they would soon find them though only to pout. The naughty children would soon come to regret however, as the gift for the chocolate bunny meant to make her pout that they had left behind. Would cause her to swear, to break their bodies as they would sadly come to find. But not all was lost, on this snowy night. For the location of the secret workshop the elves were after, would come to be found through paper rather than the chocolate bunny's might. Hopping from rooftop to rooftop Mirko was handling her section of Mustafu looking for signs of the truck or other test attacks. They managed to confirm that the pickup trucks did not leave the area, so their hope was to find the drivers to ring them out for information. Mirko and Midnight wanted to get this done before tomorrow, but both knew it was unlikely. Naturally the other three heroes all took care of their own sections, but it seemed like Mirko was the first to hit pay dirt. Hey everyone, I think I found the building where they are storing the presents. Mirko told them over her earpiece getting more antsy by the minute. Stay still and wait for us to arrive, you and Nemuri can have Santa-themed SEC after we find the presents, but that being said we are only babysitting the child till Christmas is over then it's you two. Aizawa said making it clear to both of them and his wife that he was not adopting a child anytime soon. Much to his wife's displeasure as she childishly booed him for his decision. Once they all got there they approached it from all three sides, with him and Mirko taking one entrance each while the other two tackled the third one together. 1, 2, 3. Midnight counted down as they all knocked down the door at 3 only to find, nothing. No, it was worse than nothing as whoever was here left a gift for Mirko especially. The gift was in the form of a Santa-themed bikini on one of those adjustable mannequins. Whose face looked like Mirko in a very SBMSSVSXL position. Mirko then in a blind rage kicked and stomped the SHT out of it for them making a fool out of her. While she was destroying the mannequin and the other two women restrained her, Aizawa found something interesting on the floor. It was a receipt for a fast food place, but what made it significant was that the day and time printed on it was just about a few hours before they got there. Calm down and stop contaminating the crime scene, bunny doll. I need to tell Tsukachi to look into something while we secure this scene. Aizawa said, getting his scarf ready to stop Mirko. What did you say? Mirko screamed in his face before getting wrapped up by him. First off, Midnight has made it clear to me how much you like her dominating you, so don't act like you aren't her toy in the bedroom. Secondly, I found something that could give us a face to track down. He said, showing them the receipt before calling the detective. During this call, Midnight was currently comforting a pouting Mirko, and the last person there was laughing her butt off at them for being called out. When the police got there, they also found a buckets of fried chicken in the corner, that was still warm, meaning they were not far behind the criminals. Random male narrator. As the adults went further down this snowy little hole, the children had unknowingly joined. All thanks to the nose of a little demonic beast, and her holiday spirit that went plus ultra and beyond. Mustafu. With Maple and siblings. After she ate the Christmas lights, they realized they were short one line of lights, so Izuku looked online. Almost all the stores were sold out at this point, and so he had to reserve some at a store in Mustafu, but they were pickup only. Which was how they were now in Mustafu, walking to a restaurant specialized in fried chicken with a mascot of a Westerner old man out front. I know I said we could take our time now that we grabbed the lights, but come on Maple, people are staring at us. Izuku said, with the second half being in a hushed whisper so no one except those with enhanced hearing could pick up on. Maple, being hungry, had ordered a whole bucket of fried chicken, for herself. While Izuku and Himiko ate in smaller portions, with Himiko drawing little chicken faces on hers in ketchup before she bit into them. It's fine Izuku, so relax already, they aren't getting home till later tonight anyway. Maple said, not noticing the stares of the other customers, with her thinking he was worried about getting in trouble for going out without getting permission first. Himiko for her part simply just did not care about the staring, as she was mentally telling them all to stop staring at her. Maple. After they finished eating, Maple had noticed a wallet on the ground just barely covered by the snow. Sniffing the wallet, she was interrupted by Izuku swiping it from her hand just as she was about to lick it. Maple. Izuku scolded her, putting his arms on his sides in fists. I agree with Izuku, eating a stranger's wallets is a bit much even for you. Himiko said, sighing at this as she could not argue with Izuku here. I was trying to track the scent to try and return it. Maple yelled at them but did not get any attention as a truck's horn passing by caused anyone not beside her to hear her. By licking it? Izuku and Himiko said at the same time, tilting their heads in confusion trying to understand Maple logic. After a bit more back and forth they decided to allow her to trace it back to the owner instead of going straight to the police. However, it led them to a warehouse, a bit odd, but since it was still a little bit of time till Christmas they were not surprised to see people still working in warehouses. When they went to knock on the warehouse door they got no response, but Maple said she could smell people inside and smoke. Izuku may not have said it out loud, but when he heard smoke he was worried that the people inside might be knocked out and in need of medical help. Though the police sirens they could hear caused Izuku's intuition to go from a murmur this was dangerous to a scream. It was this momentary pause that caused him to let Maple do what she did. I found your wallet. Maple yelled, throwing the doors open with a big smile before getting shot by multiple shotguns as the other two jumped to the sides in time. Though it took a few seconds she got up coughing out bullets, with her jacket in shreds she decided to just throw it off. Assuming there might still be innocent people inside she decided to transform and SCK up all the smoke to clear her view. Luckily she was wearing her armor underneath, so despite slightly regretting it earlier she was glad she did it now that she was being attacked. As for the men, well, let's just say they would have nightmares for the rest of their lives after she beat them up that night. The four heroes arrived there just short of 30 minutes after they began scolding her and the other two for letting her do so. But even so, Mirko and Midnight were smiling in relief as their children were safe, though their worries about the kidnapped child were done with. Finding a dead man in a few buildings later, seemingly shot dead by one of the guns in a low-income apartment in what would be defined as a criminal neighborhood. With a destroyed sweater on the floor, they pieced together this was why no one found him till he began to rot next to his heater. Checking the quirk registry, they found him and his quirk, or rather how it was updated just shortly after he was fired from his job. When they messaged, the doctor told them that he thought it was odd. But given how late bloomers was a thing and how some quirks only awaken in people after going through a mental breakdown. As a result, it was written off with little concern and was only recommended several different quirk therapists to help him learn to use it in hopes they could find a new job. As a result, they had to accept the answer and apologized to the doctor for wasting their time. So, with the leader dead and the presents recovered, it was declared a success. Asking the getaway drivers got them nowhere, as they found out they were hired to steal the presents for the employer getting half of the payment. Then the employers were supposed to show up with the other half of their payment. Which was more guns that were supposed to be made of better materials than the ones they already received. However, they only spoke through the phone so one knew their face. This whole situation feels odd. Naomasa murmured out loud to himself under his breath, catching the attention of Aizawa. You mean how it felt too easy? That there was no clear motive besides the so-called mastermind having been fired by that CEO a few weeks back. Or maybe how he showed a high level of intelligence out of nowhere based on what his neighbors told us about him. Aizawa said, listing off all the discrepancies, coincidences, and why it felt odd to them all. I don't know, but in any case let's just hope nothing goes wrong again for you when you redo the event tomorrow. Rudolph. He said, chuckling at the glare the underground hero was sending him. Whether it was for the nickname his wife called him on the job, or the reminder he would need to dress up like that again had mattered little, as either way he was unhappy with the comment. I hate to break it to you, but unless I can find someone to fill in for the 2 people Iwabumi sent, then I will need to call the event off. She told me that you told her the robbery was committed by an EX employee, so she refused to do any more jobs for me, the CEO said calmly in disappointment for the first half before yelling the second half. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, sir, but as a hero she had access to any investigations that are at her security clearance level. On top of that, her own employees were caught up in it, so she had a right to know who did it, the detective said with a heavy sigh at the end, as he always hated reminding business owners the police were not obligated to bend the rules for them due to being wealthy. Having to get 2 police officers to escort him out of the building, they came across them. Emmy was watching Maple and her siblings in the break room while their parents finished filling out both reports. One for the actual case and the other for their 3 children committing technically self-defense that also essentially became vigilantism. How would you kids like to be hired to help with the Christmas event? He called out to them, surprising them due to his shouting. But before the officers could shove him out, the heroine turned to the children. Do you want to do it? She asked as both Izuku and Himiko turned to Maple for the decision. As long as our moms give us the okay. Maple said, happy that she would get to wear a Santa costume this time for Christmas. This was when Aizawa got there, as he looked between the CEO and the break to realize what they were talking about. Of course, he had to ask Maple if she was willing to do it. He said with a sigh as he hoped he did not get the reindeer costume again. Random male narrator, with the present saved and the naughty workshop shut down, all was right once again. The children's smiles were returned, and the last of the lights were hung so all could sleep soundly yet again. That is the tale of this little demonic beast first Christmas, so to all I wish a good night, the AFO lair. End. He said, taking a sip of his glass of milk, finishing it off, letting out a satisfied hum. The children before him on the other hand trembling in fear as they were bound and gagged. Tears and snot running down their faces as they just spent the last few days crying. Between watching their families tortured to death and this random story session from their captor, they had now lost all hope of surviving. Clapping could be heard as an old man in a lab coat stood up, happy with his MSTR's progress. Very good, sir, though I think it is a bit odd you wanted to practice reading stories for when we get that Maple girl. Though I could tell from observing the children that despite the trauma you inflicted upon them you were able to calm them down compared to before thanks to your story. Garaki said, never once disobeying their MSTR, even so he cleared his throat. As for my reports on these children, most are useless except that one with the spiky black hair. They are the only one that can be used for a nomu based off their parents' genetics. With their water quirk already as a base, I will add other elemental quirks to make them into a long-range multi-attack nomu. Too bad their parents were already killed by that villain, but it cannot be helped, just let me know if you need me to dispose of the other bodies in my lab. Garaki said to all for one, bowing before he picked up the child he needed, their red cap falling to the ground. With all their quirks stolen except for the child that was just taken, he joined them with their families, well, what was left of them anyway. As a few days later the mini pocket dimension quirk he stole recently was used in combination with a few others. Along with all the liquefied corpses to fake the death of a rather large creature he recently discovered. Giving the metal manipulating quirk of one of the children to a quirkless man, after purposely making those shabby guns help to cover his trail in the kidnapping needed for the trap. Though it was just a backup plan, he was glad he did it as the maple girl unintentionally wasted the trap he set for those 4 heroes. It was also a safe call to control the abducted parents to book holiday trips to the States to slow the police down in their search. Though they would eventually find out, with how stretched they are throughout the holidays. He knew they could only track down trips in the country before Christmas ended. Though he was curious as to several things that had happened that night. Starting with the most important, who was it that made the smoke screen both times before they entered? Oh well, he doubted that it was anyone of importance, just another vigilante. But the other one was a much simpler question that had little importance, though it was amusing to watch the results. What was that Mirko-looking mannequin doing there, and why did they decide to put it into such a position to PSS her off? So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 8. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Kuji17 on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video, till then goodbye.